There are foreigners threatening our way of life, and then there are foreigners threatening our way of life. We're not in the latter condition. This is a part of a larger thing. I was looking at Tucker Carlson's interview of Viktor Orban, the Hungarian prime minister, the other day, and Orban was, of course, talking about the implications of the new political dispensation in America for Europe, and was extolling the virtues of a rising respect for borders. And of course, Hungary's, given its geographic location there in Europe, Eastern Europe, is one of the countries where the migrant issue has arisen, and where he's been very strenuous in, keeping people out of Hungary who they don't want in. So he felt, to some degree, affirmed by the drift of policy in America. And I think this is an issue that you're going to see. You're seeing it throughout the European Union and in the United Kingdom of reactions against. And I think it's in that's defense of the nation state, a kind of populist pushback against the laxity of the governing elites in these respective countries regarding who comes in, and the preservation of our, quote unquote, our way of life, our culture, and so on. That's how I see it. I see it in a larger context, and I see it as a continuation of a drift in the West that I associate with Brexit, where the popular sentiment in the United Kingdom was to leave the European Union, and we're seeing some of that here in the United States. And there had better be a better answer from you guys to this sentiment in these various polities than "you are racist," because loving my country and wanting to keep it from being overrun by foreigners who speak a different language and who don't respect our cultural norms and who threaten our way of life is something that has to be respected in a democratic polity and managed, not dismissed with the back of your hand.
I hear you. I hear you completely, and I'm going to get in trouble for this, but it's as usual with anything like that. I think a lot of reasonable people are thinking it. When I read about Europe, and you read about the sort of thing that happens in some Western European country or England, it seems to be by the week, where a Muslim immigrant, or sometimes child of Muslim immigrants, does something really awful. And so Munich, just a few days ago, an Afghan ends up driving into a crowd of people. And that's a kind of crime that you can't really stop. And the idea is that this person has the same beef that goes back to what we suffered in New York 9/11, the West against Islam. And they feel that their job is to kill people in the name of what the West has done. I can imagine I know some Germans in particular who feel it's time to stop letting people in who are Muslim, because there's the chance that especially one of the men is going to harbor that kind of view and kill people. Not to mention what I hear also too often for it not to be a general trend. It is real that if you have different views of the place of women in society based on either your religion or your culture, a lot of young men in those countries make life very difficult for the native women. I have an idea that that's something women are just supposed to tolerate. I've heard that from too many German women for it not to be true, and you read about it all the time. Now, of course, there are white men who behave the same way, but there's a disproportion apparently in terms of the Muslim men. And this goes back even to the 70s and 80s with Turks in Germany. I've read about it, and I remember hearing about it back when I was in college from some German people I knew who did not seem to me to be bigots. They were just talking about a reality. Yeah, the idea that the country is that's going to be the majority of the population when these are people who have different values. Yeah, I get that. But is that the issue here? I mean, are the people coming from Latin
Well, maybe
America.
the issue in Hungary, but it may not so much the issue here in the United States.
Here, when the
Latinos
anyway. Come, they basically become us. Generally, in two generations, their children speak English and listen to the same music everybody else does. And I'd say this too much on this show, but in the neighborhood I live in, I see this. I don't see these Spanish-speaking people as some invading horde who are going to change America. I mean, America has become more like them to an extent in terms of their music and their food, but it's all really pretty much okay. And yes, there's the occasional criminal. One of them burned a woman alive on the subway a month ago. Yeah, he was insane. That was just one person. So I feel like, I hate saying this, I feel like what Hungary has been defending itself against, and I'm not an Orban fan, but saying we're not letting anybody in. Maybe it's a little overdone, but what they're afraid of is different from somebody coming from Honduras with their two kids and, opening up a little stall on the street. Do you see what I mean? I don't feel the danger here that there unfortunately seems to be in Sweden or in Germany, etc.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think the danger is anything near the same to threat to our, quote, way of life and our culture. I suppose it could be down the road, but if you had millions coming across unauthorized for a decade, if you had, in effect, Kamala Harris had won the election and the pre-existing policies had been reaffirmed, I think you could get to that. But
Glenn, I just want to insert very quickly.
Yeah, sure.
This is the analogy. What was it? 10 and change years ago, when there were those two brothers who killed people in the Boston Marathon, the Tsarnaev brothers.
Yeah.
Muslim, Caucasus Muslim.
Yeah.
And they did that in the name of Islam. And in a very abstract way, it's not that anybody was hurting them, but the big brother was kind of a thug and thought it was his duty, and he seduced the little brother into joining him in doing it. And if you follow the little one, Johar, and you read his text messages and things, all of it is done with a kind of a swagger. It's part of, being a teenager. He was kind of getting off on it until he was caught and ended up spending the rest of his life in prison. And the older one ended up dying in a raid when they were caught. Imagine if most of our immigrants, I hate to say it, but most of our immigrants weren't Latinos, but most of our immigrants were from Muslim countries. Now, of course, it would hardly be that anything like every one of them was going to do this. It might be some tiny number. But if the Tsarnaev brothers were typical, if we had millions and millions and millions of families producing brothers like that, how would we feel about immigration? Then I would understand. I hate to say it. But the Latinos are not animated by that animus that the Tsarnaev brothers were dealing with. Anyway, I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, no, you're making a point, and I get it. I see what you're saying. There are foreigners threatening our way of life, and then there are foreigners threatening our way of life. We're not in the latter condition.